In this update, we've got a major pattern shift coming into the first week of January. But first, let's take you back to our Christmas blizzard. And here's the updated totals from the National Weather Service for the last 72 hours for snowfall. In these areas that are highlighted in this orange shaded area, that's where they picked up 8 to 12 inches of snow across just south of the Denver region, back into Nebraska, into the Dakotas. And these areas highlighted in red actually picked up 18 to 24 inches. But further south, those blue areas, 5 to 8, and some lighter blue areas, anywhere from 1 to 3 inches. Now that system is finally on the move, and even Kansas City is getting snow this morning. Eventually, St. Louis will be getting into the action with some snow across that region. But here's where the snow has fallen so far this season. So we've had some pretty good amounts, in fact, heavier amounts across the Intermountain West regions. We had some really significant totals, especially early on across portions of New England. Now that has since subsided a little bit, but you can see where the snowfall has fallen since October 1st. And we'll be laying the groundwork, and some new development will be taking place across, I think, this region as we go into that first week of January. So let's talk about this storm right now. So here's where we stand. It's still on the move, and in fact, it's kind of a transferring into one of these MCVs, one of these mesoscale convective systems. This counterclockwise swirl is just wringing out any precipitation that's left. Out ahead of it, you're still within that warm sector across the Northeast. So that means more heavy rain for you guys up the East Coast. But there's the snow back behind it. And then we have a new renewed system that's coming in off the Pacific Northwest, with renewed totals across Washington and Oregon, back into Northern California. And eventually in the coming days, this will lift further south as well, back into Central and Southern California. But here's the rain for the Northeast this afternoon heading into tonight. So yeah, these areas don't really need much more rain. In fact, they've seen their 5th and upwards to 10th wettest year on record. But more heavy rain is moving into the Richmond region, back into the DC. Maryland will get back with more heavy rain, back into Dover, into the Philadelphia region, into Trenton, up into New York City, and yes, even Hartford, back into Harrisburg. In fact, Hartford has picked up 63 inches so far in the season. You're already 17 inches above average. You don't need any more rain, but you're going to get a lot more of it. And this will continue to lift up into the Northeast. But there's the snow from that little MCV. So yes, we've got that system that's going to be diving southeast, but there's also a renewed piece of energy that's coming in from the north, from Wisconsin. That's kind of going to do a little loop-de-loo over Illinois, and finally that will be the mechanism to push it eastbound. But this is your snow amounts that's going to leave behind. And the latest SREF mean ensemble guidance is pretty good true depiction on, I think, how this is going to play out. So we're going to probably get a couple of inches of snow across southern portions of Wisconsin into Illinois. A lot of that will shift back into Missouri. That's the snow that's going to be flying over Kansas City and back into St. Louis. This could actually reach as far south as maybe some flurries into the Tennessee region. In fact, I've heard some flurry reports even this morning in northern Arkansas, and some of this actually could even drift as far north as into Alabama, the far least northern interiors. But Kentucky will likely get some snow out of this deal. Not much, right? You're talking less than an inch. You're talking flurries to a dusting to up to an inch of snow through Indiana, through Ohio. And once you get back into, say, Pittsburgh, could pick up maybe an inch from this system. And that's what will be lifting up back into New England. And there's the rain over the next 5 days. That'll put you through now until the end of the year. So you got that dry slot coming in on the backside, pretty dry air, but colder air on the backside within your warm sector still across Florida and up the East Coast. That's where the rain is going to be, and the heavier rain is going to be. And they're back behind it. Some of this will be in the form of snowfall. And then there's the heavier rain between now and the next 5 days across the Pacific Northwest. And then inundated in Northern California, getting into Central California as that system continues to shift further south as we get closer to the new year. So if you are new to the channel and like detailed weather breakdowns, hit the subscribe button and you're in to get all my daily content on this channel. So going forward, here's the new year. So what we're going to find out is we had this really active Pacific jet stream, right? That brought into more of a zonal flow. Obviously, December was really warm across a good part of the lower 48. Finally, we're going to start seeing that retreat and start relaxing. That zonal flow is kind of going to go away. You see the ridging back here slowly starts to erode. And the more that erodes and that ridge retrogrades back up into Canada, that will allow further troughing to sneak underneath, tapping into that more active subtropical El Nino type flow. And that'll set the stage for much cooler conditions, if not colder conditions. Pretty strong cold front for coming for New Year's Day. These are high temperatures, folks. In fact, some of these areas further south, middle 30s in Oklahoma for highs. You haven't seen that so far this season. 45 for Dallas, you haven't seen that either. This would be likely the coldest, strongest front of the year so far. And that high temperatures drops it a pretty good far south is in the southeast all the way up into the east coast. That's going to tap into that more active subtropical jet stream, because if we look at the teleconnections for the first, say, 7 to 10 days of January, we see a predominant push, especially if that ridge starts to retrograde back up into Canada. That will allow that colder air to sneak underneath. And it's always a good sign if you're looking for colder temperatures across the central and eastern 2/3 of the US. You have this linkage with the EPO going negative throughout that first 10 days of the month of January, also combined with the negative NAO. Those two linkage usually sets up a pretty cold blast, going into that first week of January. And January is typically the coldest month of the season. So highlighting the first time frame. So we're going to break down these storm systems. Once we hit the first, right, you got that cold air draining in from the north. Then we have a little bit of vorticity, a little bit of a dip in the jet stream that's going to be dipping down to the Missouri Valley, back into the Ohio Valley, and up into the northeast. You have a secondary piece, this lift mechanism that's coming in, that's raining this morning and the next couple of days across the northern tier. But once we get into that first day of January, now that's going to be over into Southern California, and this is the storm system that will be coming across Arizona into New Mexico and eventually tap into that energy once you get into the southern plains. But the first setup, as far as like at least some snow going into, say, your New Year's Eve to that New Year's Day time frame, we could see a little bit of snow falling across that region into Tennessee, into Kentucky, back into Ohio again, into West Virginia, coming across Pennsylvania, back into New York, and up here into Vermont and New Hampshire, into portions of Maine. But once we could go into that third time frame, things get a little bit more interesting, right? So especially for the southern flank of the United States, we're going to be tapping into that more active subtropical jet stream. You got the vorticity that's going to be coming across, but at the same time, look how low this jet stream is. That's about as far south as we've seen it so far this winter. Plus, we have a low pressure center that's going to be developing just south of Texas. That's typically a good sign, where especially if colder air drains from the north, that once we tap into that system, likely a storm track would be highlighted over the Texas panhandle, through Oklahoma, and come up this traverse area into Missouri, back into Illinois, and up here into Indiana and Ohio. That's what I'm looking for once we tap into that energy going into that third and fourth time frame. So we're likely going to have a storm system starting to develop, enter New Mexico, back into the Texas panhandle, into Oklahoma, with some at least snow flying across that region. It's likely going to be a chilly rain further south of that, portions of, say, North Texas into Central Texas, just a cold rain for you guys. But further north, it's likely going to be cold enough to start snowing across Oklahoma into the Texas panhandle. That's the storm system that I think will lift up and to hit Kansas and eventually into Missouri and back into the Ohio Valley. But there's the temperatures. It doesn't really need to be that cold to snow. So those are your low temperatures on the 4th, right around that 30, 32, 35 degree temperature. So it's likely going to be a wet snow, but it does in fact appear to be the beginning stages of a snowstorm that's going to be further south than what we've seen it so far this winter. And that's the storm system that will be traversing from the panhandle of Texas up into heading up into the northeast. So there's the snow traversing across Missouri, through Illinois, back into Indiana, into Ohio, into Michigan by then. And also that will be continuing to lift up into the northeast. But now you're cold enough to some of that be transferring to snow across West Virginia, into Pennsylvania, into New York. And I think eventually once we hit that 5th, 6th, and especially that 7th time frame, likely some of this snow will be going into the I-95 corridor by the time we end that first week of January. And the ensembles members are already highlighting that opportunity with renewed systems that's coming in from the Intermountain West. Then we have that secondary system that's coming in from across the New Year's Eve timeframe, New Year's Day. They'll be traversing across Arizona, through New Mexico, highlighted over the Texas Panhandle around the 3rd and 4th timeframe of January. And that system will be lifting northbound into Oklahoma, through northern portions of Arkansas, back into Missouri, through Illinois, getting into Indiana and Ohio. And then once we get more colder air coming in from Canada, that will tap into this energy. And yes, you're finally getting some color on the map across the I-95 corridor. And this will be lifting across into the northeast around that 5th, 6th, and 7th time frame. So if we zoom in to the New York City region, I know it's been a long time. In fact, I think I heard this morning 681 days since New York City has seen like an inch of snow, right? It's been over 2 years. But check this out, right? We look at the EPS, we look at the 24-hour matrix from the ensemble guidance, and first it highlights that system across New Year's Eve, New Year's Day time frame. Not terribly too many ensembles, so that probability is not likely going to happen. But that 5th, 6th, and 7th time frame, now we're looking more like 50% of the 51 members highlighting at least some snow across that region. So this could be the storm system that sets the stage at least for some snow. And then going forward throughout the rest of January, there's definitely a lot more color on the map that you'll have more opportunities going deeper into January. But the setup is real for at least the first 7 days, if not 10 days, as we're going into be a transferring system of that, like coming out of that zonal flow, going into the retrograde of the ridge. And so by the time we hit that January 7th time frame, look where the ridge is. Well to the north up there in Greenland, up there into Alaska. That puts the cold air underneath, and we'll have a transition to a much more colder setup as we head into that first week of 7 to 10 days compared to what we've seen so far this winter. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely hit the subscribe button, and catch me next update and protect you before and after storm.